Hello, welcome back to my channel. ¿Alguna vez has tenido que llevar tú mismo una reunión en inglés? Si es que sí, puede que tuvieras que pedirle a alguien que se presentase antes de empezar. O bien que tuvieras que poner en contexto a los participantes de la reunión, porque está la típica persona a la que le han reenviado la convocatoria a último momento y no tiene ni idea de lo que va la reunión. Y puede también que tuvieras que insistir varias veces a la gente para que participara. La cosa es que si no conseguimos guiar bien a los participantes en cada fase de la reunión, puede que la reunión acabe siendo un poco caótica y que no cumplas los objetivos que te habías fijado. A veces es al terminar la reunión cuando nos damos cuenta de que no se ha comentado un tema importante, o de que no ha habido suficiente tiempo para preguntas y respuestas, o de que alguna persona ha dedicado demasiado tiempo en tratar un tema suyo y no se han podido tratar los temas de la agenda, y eso pues es una pena. Lo que sucede normalmente es que tienes que volver a convocar otra reunión para ver si así se soluciona el problema. Si te fijas, un buen moderador guiará perfectamente a los participantes a lo largo de toda la reunión, de manera que los participantes saben en qué fase se encuentran en cada momento y cuál es el objetivo de esta fase de la reunión. Por ejemplo, vamos a empezar con las presentaciones. Ahora vamos a revisar los puntos de la agenda. Vamos a abrir el turno de preguntas y respuestas. Pues todo esto es lo que vamos a ver en este vídeo y vamos a aprender a hacerlo en inglés. He preparado más de 20 frases para que puedas guiar a tu audiencia perfectamente en tu próxima reunión en inglés y puedas así conseguir los objetivos que te marcaste. Además, como siempre, tengo también un PDF con la transcripción de todas las frases que veremos en este vídeo, así como las explicaciones que dé y su traducción al español. Si quieres acceder al PDF, lo único que tienes que hacer es darle clic a este link abajo en la descripción del vídeo, poner tu correo electrónico y así te suscribirás y recibirás tanto este PDF como también los futuros PDFs que vaya creando en los próximos vídeos. My name is Kate Maudsley. I am a lawyer working at a pharmaceutical company and I am certified by Cambridge to teach English to adults. In this channel, we talk about how to improve your business English to sound more professional and feel more confident when using English at work. So without further ado, let's dive in. The first thing we want to do in a meeting is to welcome the participants. And if necessary, we will also make introductions. Let's see the sentences to welcome the participants in our meeting. Welcome everyone to today's online meeting. I'm looking forward to a productive discussion on strategies for expansion. In Spanish, this sentence would be: Bienvenidos a todos a la reunión online de hoy. Espero con ganas el debate sobre estrategias de expansión. Let's have a look at another sentence that would be suitable for a meeting with a large audience, with lots of people. Hello and welcome to all participants joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you here for the company's annual performance meeting. And in Spanish, the sentence would be: Hola y bienvenidos a todos los participantes que estáis aquí hoy. Es un placer teneros aquí para la reunión anual de desempeño de la empresa. And if you want to use a slightly more relaxed tone, you can say something like this. Hello team, I hope you're all doing well. Thank you for being here as we gather for a monthly online meeting. And in Spanish, hola equipo, espero que estéis todos bien. Gracias por estar aquí para nuestra reunión online mensual. Now let's see how we can suggest a round of introductions. You can say, I don't think all of us know each other yet. Let's introduce ourselves quickly before we start. And then you can either introduce yourself first or you can ask someone else to introduce themselves first. In Spanish, the sentence would be: Creo que no nos conocemos todos aún. Vamos a presentarnos rápidamente antes de empezar. And another sentence to suggest a round of introductions could be: Before we dive into our agenda, why don't we make a quick round of introductions? I'll begin. With this sentence, we're saying that we're going to start a round of introductions, then I'm going to introduce myself first to the team, and that the next phase will be the review of the agenda. And that takes me to stage number 2 of the meeting, the review of the agenda. In this phase, we will briefly outline the agenda to set the expectations for the meeting. We do this because we want to make sure that everyone in the meeting knows what's going to be discussed. I've prepared a long sentence for you on this point, so I'm going to say the whole sentence first, and we will break it down into smaller sentences afterwards. As we get started, let's run through the agenda together. We'll kick off with the updates on the project milestones. We'll move on to discussing the upcoming marketing strategies, and we'll wrap up with a review of the action items and next steps. Does this align with everyone's expectations for today's meeting? So the first sentence is, as we get started, let's run through the agenda together. To run through is a phrasal verb that means to quickly review or informally review. In Spanish, the sentence would be, para empezar, vamos a repasar la agenda juntos. The sentence continues saying, we'll kick off with updates on the project milestones. To kick off is also a phrasal verb, slightly informal, that means to begin or start, usually with lots of energy or enthusiasm. Instead of saying, we'll kick off with this or that, you can say, the first topic on the agenda is this or that. Or you could also say, we'll start by doing this or that. We'll kick off with the updates on the project milestones. In Spanish would be, empezaremos con el progreso en los hitos del proyecto. The next part of the sentence says, we'll move on to discussing the upcoming marketing strategies. To move on to something means to transition from an activity or task to another one. Instead of we'll move on to, you can also say the second topic on the agenda is, or you could also say then we'll discuss. In Spanish, the sentence would be, pasaremos a comentar la próxima estrategia de marketing. We continue the sentence by saying, and we'll wrap up with a review of the action items and next steps. To wrap up is also a phrasal verb, and it means to conclude or finish an activity or a task. You could also say, and we'll finish with a review of... In Spanish, the sentence would be, y concluiremos con una revisión de los elementos de acción y los siguientes pasos. The next and last part of the sentence was, does this align with everyone's expectations for today's meeting? ¿Esto se alinea con vuestras expectativas para la reunión de hoy? Let's move on to stage number 3. Phase number 3 is to establish the rules for the meeting. You might consider it necessary to remind participants about the rules for the meeting and also to encourage participation. And you can do it using one of these sentences. Let's see. To ensure a productive meeting, let's remind everybody about a few rules for a meeting. Please be mindful of time, raise your hand to speak, and you can use emojis and the chat for relevant comments and questions. Let's break down this sentence into smaller sentences. The first sentence says, to ensure a productive meeting, let's remind everyone about a few rules for a meeting. Para garantizar una reunión productiva, recordemos todos algunas reglas para la reunión. Please be mindful of time. Por favor, tened en cuenta el tiempo. Raise your hand to speak. Por favor, levantad la mano para hablar. And you can use emojis and the chat for relevant questions and comments. Podéis usar los emoticonos y el chat para preguntas y comentarios relevantes. If we want to encourage participation, we can say something like this. Let's make this meeting interactive. Don't hesitate to ask questions, to express your opinions, or make any comments you consider. If you can, turn on your video to help us improve communication. Let's break down this big sentence into shorter phrases. Let's make this meeting interactive. Hagamos que esta reunión sea interactiva. Don't hesitate to ask questions, express your opinions, or make any comments you consider. No dudéis en hacer preguntas, en expresar vuestras opiniones, o hacer cualquier comentario que consideréis. If you can, turn on your video to help us improve communication. Si podéis, encended la cámara para ayudarnos a mejorar la comunicación. And let's move on to stage number 4. This is presentation of the main topic. In this phase, we will present the main topic and we can use slides or other means to help understanding. We can also encourage participation once again. Let's have a look at the sentence. I'd like to provide you with an overview of the highlights of the company's annual performance. You will notice a progressive increase in revenue. I encourage you all to share your insights and opinions. What do you think has contributed to our success over the past year? Let's break down this sentence into shorter phrases that you can adapt to your work. We start by saying, I'd like to provide you with an overview of the highlights of the company's annual performance, in this case. In Spanish, this would be, me gustaría presentaros una visión global o una perspectiva general en este caso, de los aspectos más importantes del desempeño anual de la empresa. The sentence continues saying, you will notice a progressive increase in revenue. Notaréis o os daréis cuenta de un aumento progresivo de ingresos. The sentence continues saying, I encourage you all to share your insights and opinions. What do you think has contributed to our success over the past year? Os animo a todos a que compartáis vuestras opiniones. ¿Qué creéis que ha contribuido a nuestro éxito durante el año pasado? Now, if you want to ask for feedback directly during the discussion, you can say, Sarah, what is your opinion on this? Or Sarah, what are your views on this? In Spanish would be, Sara, ¿cuál es tu opinión? ¿O qué piensas sobre esto? If we want to make it a bit more general, we can say, do we all agree on this? ¿Estamos todos de acuerdo? Or we could also say, does anyone have anything else to add before we move on? ¿Alguien tiene algo más que añadir antes de seguir? Now, as the moderator of the meeting, you will have to make sure that all the topics being discussed are relevant and follow the agenda. If anyone suggests a topic that is not in the agenda or that should not be discussed in this meeting, you can say, I'm sorry, I don't think we have time to discuss this in today's meeting. We should really stick to the agenda. Let's add this to next week's agenda. In Spanish, this would be, perdona, creo que no tenemos tiempo para comentar esto en la reunión de hoy. Deberíamos seguir la agenda. Vamos a añadir este tema para la agenda de la semana que viene. And if we want to say that if everyone agrees with the topic, you're going to move on with the meeting, you can say, if everyone is on the same page, we can continue with the next item. In Spanish, this would be, si estamos todos de acuerdo, podemos continuar con el siguiente punto. Let's have a look at stage number 5, Q&A, questions and answers. Even if the participants have been asking questions during the discussion, as a moderator, you will probably want to allow some time for question and answers. This will also help the quieter members of the meeting to ask questions if they have any. Let's have a look at a sentence. We have covered a lot of items in our discussion today. I want to make sure that everyone has the chance to ask questions. Do any of you want to comment on something? In Spanish, this would be, hemos cubierto muchos puntos en la conversación de hoy. Me gustaría asegurarme de que todos tenemos la oportunidad de hacer preguntas. ¿Alguien de vosotros quiere comentar algo? Or we could also say, thank you for your attention during the presentation. Let's open the floor for any discussions or comments you may have. Now, in this sentence, we say, thank you for your attention during the presentation. Let's open the floor for any questions. Open the floor for questions or open the floor to questions. They're both correct. It's a very common expression used a lot in meetings, and it's an invitation for the audience to ask questions. It's commonly used to transition from a presentation phase to an interactive phase. In Spanish, the sentence would be, gracias por vuestra atención durante la presentación. Vamos a abrir el turno de preguntas para cualquier comentario que podáis tener. And stage number 6 is summarizing key points. This will help everyone understand the main takeaways of the meeting. It also gives everyone a chance to confirm their agreement with the decisions made during the meeting. Let's have a look at a sentence. In summary, today we have discussed the project timeline, we have looked at the budget options, and we've reviewed the feedback from the users. En resumen, hoy hemos comentado los plazos del proyecto, hemos analizado las opciones del presupuesto y hemos revisado los comentarios de los usuarios. You could also introduce the key points with this sentence. Let's take a moment to recap the main takeaways from the meeting. The main takeaways means the essential lessons or points extracted from the meeting. In Spanish, the sentence would be, voy a dedicar un momento para recapitular las conclusiones más importantes de la reunión. And if you want to make sure everyone is aligned with the key points, you could say, would anyone like to share any feedback or input at this point? ¿Alguien quiere compartir algún comentario? Number 7 is actions and next steps. And in this phase, we need to clearly state which are the action items and who is responsible for each of them. This helps work to be done efficiently. Let's have a look at a sentence. As we wrap up this discussion, let's define next steps. Sarah, your action item is to prepare an initial draft for the proposal. Alex, you will coordinate with the design team for visuals. Any questions or additional tasks to assign? Now the first sentence says, as we wrap up this discussion, let's define next steps. Do you remember what wrap up means? Wrap up is a phrasal verb that means to conclude or finalize with a task or activity. Para concluir esta reunión, vamos a definir los siguientes pasos. Sarah, your action item is to prepare an initial draft of the proposal. Alex, you will coordinate with the design team for visuals. In Spanish, this would be: Sara, tu tarea es preparar el borrador inicial de la propuesta. Alex, tú coordinarás las imágenes con el equipo de diseño. Any questions or additional tasks to assign? ¿Tenéis alguna otra pregunta o alguna tarea que haya que asignar? Or another way to indicate that you're going to start assigning responsibilities would be: now that we've discussed the project plan, let's assign responsibilities. Ahora que hemos comentado el plan del proyecto, vamos a definir las responsabilidades. And with this, we move on to stage number 8. This is the last phase, closing the meeting. A big thank you to everyone for your thoughtful contributions and active participation during today's meeting. Have a nice afternoon and see you in our next weekly meeting. In Spanish, this would be: muchas gracias a todos por vuestras contribuciones y por participar activamente en la reunión de hoy. Que tengáis buena tarde y nos vemos en la próxima reunión semanal. Or we could also close the meeting saying this sentence: thank you all for joining the meeting today. Your thoughts and comments are much appreciated and I look forward to our next collaboration. In Spanish, this would be: muchas gracias a todos por uniros a la reunión de hoy. Agradecemos vuestros comentarios y opiniones y esperamos con ganas nuestra próxima colaboración. Pues con esto terminamos la lección de hoy y nos vemos en el próximo vídeo. Bye!